Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Derek was always a passionate man, truly in love with Vanessa. From the first glance, he knew he would do anything to win her over. And he did. He fought, persisted, showed who he was, proved that he wasn't there for flings but to build an entire life with her. Years later, married with 2 children whom he loved deeply, he still had that same sparkle in his eyes every time he spoke of her, as if time hadn't passed. Every wedding anniversary was celebrated with lots of love, gifts, surprises, and sincere declarations. For Derek, family was always the most precious thing he possessed. And it was precisely because of this that, on that day, he decided to do something special. The plan was simple but full of meaning. He left work early, stopped by her favorite flower shop, and picked out a bouquet that he knew would make her smile. Then he went to a store and bought a piece of jewelry he'd been eyeing for weeks, something he knew she would really like. He grabbed a bottle of wine, stopped at the bakery, and picked out the cake they always bought on special occasions. In his mind, everything would be perfect. He would arrive home as a surprise, hug her, tell her how much he loved her and how she was the best thing that ever happened to him. Then they'd celebrate another year of marriage, just as they always did. As he drove back home, his heart raced, not from suspicion, but from good anticipation, that feeling you get when you're about to make someone happy. All he could think about was her reaction, her smile, the embrace, the kiss, and the kids' joy upon seeing their parents celebrating another year of marriage. He truly believed his life was a happy one, a blessed one, built on love, respect, and companionship. He planned the surprise while the kids were still at school, so it would be just the 2 of them. When he parked in the garage, he noticed the front door was slightly ajar. It seemed strange, but he didn't suspect anything. He gathered the bags, adjusted the flowers, and opened the door with that silly grin on his face, the kind you have when you're about to surprise someone you love. What happened in the next few seconds was something he never, in his entire life, imagined he would experience. As soon as he took 2 steps inside the house, he heard a muffled sound coming from upstairs. At first, he thought it was the TV, but he quickly realized it wasn't. With each step he took, the sounds became clearer, sharper, until, not wanting to believe what he was about to see, he climbed the stairs. His heart started pounding. His hands sweated. His whole body trembled, and for some reason he couldn't explain, he kept walking. He reached the bedroom door and, when he pushed it open, the world simply stopped. Before his eyes was the scene he never imagined witnessing. Vanessa, his wife, the woman he loved so much, was there, on the bed they had shared for 19 years, under the sheets they had chosen together, on the pillows where they had fallen asleep in each other's arms countless times, with another man. A man he didn't even know. And it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't an embrace, it wasn't a misinterpreted situation. It was exactly what it looked like. 2 bodies intertwined, without any concern, without any guilt, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Derek froze. The flowers slipped from his hand, the bag with the gift fell to the floor, and the sound of the wine bottle shattering echoed in slow motion in his head. No words came out of his mouth. No scream, no questions, not even a sound. Just silence. Silence accompanied by a million thoughts exploding in his mind. How? Why? Since when? And above all, how could she do this after everything they had been through together? The evidence was right there before his eyes, and when Vanessa saw him, she panicked, pulling the sheet to cover herself, her eyes wide, unable to say anything. The man, pale and trembling with fear, stumbled out while trying to hurriedly put his clothes on. Derek began shouting, overcome with fury and pain, while the guy simply ran out of the house, fleeing without looking back. Vanessa, completely in panic, collapsed on the floor, clutching the sheet against her body and crying without being able to say a word, begging, sobbing, trying to justify herself amidst her own despair. Derek took a step back, his head throbbing, his chest feeling like it was about to burst from the pain. He went down the stairs with wobbly legs, opened the door, and got into the car, unsure of what to do or where to go. He only knew he couldn't stay there anymore. His vision seemed blurry, and the tears began to fall, first timidly, then uncontrollably, along with a suffocating mix of anger, anguish, and disbelief. His heart felt crushed, as if someone had squeezed it until nothing but pain remained. Derek drove aimlessly, lost, his mind racing, trying to understand how this was happening. He drove around the city for about half an hour, unsure whether to cry, scream, or just disappear. But the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. The pain made way for the need for answers. He needed to understand. He needed to hear from her why. He needed to know since when, who that guy was, and what led her to do something so cruel after nearly 20 years together. Without even realizing it, he was already heading back home. He stopped the car, took a deep breath, and went in. Vanessa was sitting on the couch, curled up, crying, her face red, and her hands shaking. As soon as she saw him, she tried to explain, but Derek wouldn't let her. He went straight to the point, his voice firm and charged with anger, asking, "Since when? Who is that guy? Why did you do this to me? Why did you do this to our family?" She, completely disoriented, stuttered, said she didn't know, that it was a mistake, that she was confused, that it didn't mean anything. Empty excuses, illogical, meaningless. Avoiding any concrete answer, she avoided eye contact, tried to justify herself, but only made things worse. Derek clenched his fists, trying to control himself, trying not to completely lose his mind. It felt like he was talking to a stranger, someone he never imagined knowing. After a few minutes, he realized there was no point in staying there anymore. She didn't have the courage to admit anything, nor to tell the truth. That was the last straw. Without saying another word, he went upstairs, grabbed a suitcase, threw in some clothes, documents, whatever he saw, and came back down. He passed through the living room, looked at her one last time, and with a choked voice, simply said, "I'm leaving. Today. And I'm not coming back." He left, slammed the door, and at that moment, the only certainty he had was that that house would never be his home again. And that woman would never again be part of his life. Derek woke up on the couch at his friend Mark's house. His head throbbed, his whole body felt crushed. He barely managed to sleep, and in the few hours when sleep came, he only relived that cruel scene repeatedly. The more he thought about it, the more impossible it seemed to believe that all of this was real. What had he done to deserve this? How could someone he dedicated practically half his life to destroy everything so cowardly? He tried, in every way, to find answers within himself, but none of them made sense. And if that wasn't bad enough already, it got even worse when he realized he had to face another pain, the absence of his children. For the first time in his life, he woke up without hearing Megan calling for her dad, or Blake running around the house asking for help with something. A silence that seemed to scream inside him. It tore apart any remaining hope. But even without strength, he knew he had to make decisions. After all, this chaos was now part of his life, and pretending it was a nightmare wouldn't change anything. Late in the afternoon, he took a deep breath and decided to reach out to the kids. He couldn't imagine they didn't even know what had happened. He sent messages, tried calling, and when he finally managed to talk to Megan, the blow hit even harder. She answered dryly, coldly, distantly. She said she knew about the situation, but it was his fault. She simply threw it in his face that if Vanessa did what she did, it was because he had always been absent, cold, and more concerned with work than with his own family. Words that pierced his chest like a blade. And deep down, he knew this wasn't coming from her. This came from everything Vanessa had poisoned in the kids' minds. He tried to argue, tried to make Megan understand that it didn't make sense, that he had always been present, always done everything for that family. But it was like talking to a wall. On the other side, he only heard accusations, judgments, criticisms, as if, overnight, he had become a stranger, someone despicable, someone who was never good enough. The same situation repeated itself with Blake. Even though he was younger, he seemed to have memorized the exact same lines. As if they had been prepared for it. Derek hung up the phone in pieces. What was happening was worse than any nightmare. Vanessa hadn't just destroyed a marriage. She had destroyed an entire family. And that hurt much more than any betrayal. He spent days locked up, in shock, processing every word, every rejection, trying to understand if there was ever a time when he was truly loved by those people who now spat hateful words in his face that he never imagined hearing. But as the days went by, the pain began to turn into anger. He couldn't accept being painted as the villain. He couldn't accept that an entire history of dedication was being reduced to lies constructed by someone so deceitful. And that's when he decided to react. He began gathering documents, evidence, payment records, old messages, everything that could show who he really was within that house. He consulted lawyers, understood his rights, and prepared for what would be the toughest battle of his entire life. Meanwhile, Vanessa continued playing her game. On social media, she posted smiling pictures, pretending everything was fine, as if nothing had happened. Pretending to be the perfect mother, the warrior woman, the wife betrayed by a cold, absent, and insensitive man. And to Derek's surprise, many people believed this version. Her friends, relatives, even people close to him started distancing themselves, as if he were, indeed, that terrible man she described. It was as if, suddenly, he had become a monster that never existed. The divorce hearing was scheduled. And if he thought it would just be the end of a marriage, he was completely wrong. It was there that he realized Vanessa was willing to go much further than he imagined. She asked for the house, demanded an absurd amount of alimony, wanted the cars, the savings, and, as if that weren't enough, demanded full custody of the children. She claimed he wasn't emotionally capable of being a father, that he had always been absent, that he had never been a good example, and that the children were better off away from him. Derek listened to all of this in silence, holding back as much as possible to avoid exploding. But inside, he was shattered. It was as if every word she said was another stab. And the worst part was seeing that Megan and Blake were there, on her side, confirming everything. As if he were, indeed, a stranger, an intruder, someone who didn't belong to that family. The pain he felt that day was indescribable. A pain that can't compare to anything else. And for the first time, he felt something he never imagined feeling, the sensation of being completely disposable. In the days that followed, Derek realized that insisting on maintaining any ties in that scenario would only prolong the suffering. So he made a drastic decision. He sold what he could, quit his job, transferred his position to another branch in a distant city, and left. Without looking back, without warning, without leaving a trace. He packed what was left of his dignity and walked away. He needed to start over. He needed to rebuild himself. Because there, in that place, in that environment, in that scenario, only ruins remained. Upon arriving in the new city, he decided he didn't want to hear from anyone anymore. He shut himself off. Cut off all contact with the past. He became a cold, distant, dry man. He focused all his energy on work, leaving no room for friendships, relationships, or connections. Everything he once believed in, about love, family, and loyalty, had died. And inside him, only one certainty remained: from then on, he would never allow anyone to hurt him that way again. 7 years had passed since the day Derek left everything behind. 7 years where he rebuilt his life from scratch, in a city where no one knew his past, his scars, or his ghosts. And even though his heart had been broken in ways that seemed irreparable, life, in a very unexpected way, placed someone in his path capable of healing wounds he believed were incurable. Olivia appeared without him even looking. A strong woman, generous, with a lightness that contrasted with all the pain he carried. Someone who also had her own traumas, her own battles, but who saw more in him than just the wounds left by the past. At first, he resisted. He tried to push her away in every way. He avoided conversations outside of work, refused invitations, locked himself in his own world as if believing love was a trap he never wanted to be part of again. But Olivia was different. She didn't insist, didn't force it. She was simply there. Present, attentive, with a patience that, little by little, dismantled every defense he had built. And when he realized it, he was smiling without noticing. He missed her without wanting to admit it. And when he realized, he was completely in love. Their relationship grew with a naturalness he never imagined experiencing again. And a few years later, their love was crowned with the arrival of Chloe, a girl who brought Derek a kind of love he had never experienced. Taking care of that child, watching her grow, hearing her call him Dad, brought back a part of him that he thought had died. For the first time in many years, he felt like he was exactly where he should be. He had a wife who truly loved him, a daughter who was the light of his life, a house full of love, and a home that, now, finally made sense. And it was just when everything seemed finally peaceful that, on an ordinary afternoon, his phone rang. An unknown number. For a second, he thought about ignoring it, but something inside him made him answer. And on the other end of the line, a voice he knew very well. Megan. The daughter he hadn't seen, hadn't spoken to, hadn't heard from since the day he decided to leave and start his life over. Her voice was shaky, nervous, insecure. There was a heavy silence between each word, as if she were trying to gather the courage to say what she needed to say. And when she finally managed to speak, she said something that made his heart race in a way it hadn't in a long time. She said she was about to get married. And that, if he accepted, she wanted him to walk her down the aisle. For a few seconds, Derek didn't know what to say. It was as if the entire world had stopped around him. The man who learned to live without looking back, who got used to absence, who built an entire life without expecting anything more from the past, was now there, listening to his own daughter ask for something he never imagined she would even want. He took a deep breath, and before he could respond, Megan started crying. She said she was sorry, that she now understood everything, that she had been manipulated, that she grew up hearing lies, that she believed things that, today, she knows were never true. That she had spent years carrying resentment that, deep down, should never have existed. And that, more than a request to walk her down the aisle, this was a plea for forgiveness. A plea for them to somehow reconnect. Derek stayed silent. Part of him wanted to say yes immediately, hug her, forget everything, and simply be her father again. But another part remembered everything he had lived through, everything he had suffered, the wounds that were still there, open, throbbing. But deep down, he knew that the love he always felt for his children never ceased to exist. It was dormant, hurt, hidden, but it never disappeared. And then, with a choked voice, he replied that yes, he would accept. But that, before the wedding, they needed to talk, to clarify everything, to let out everything that had been stuck for all those years. A few days later, another surprise. Blake, the youngest son, also reached out to him. And just like Megan, he too carried regrets. He too had realized, over the years, that the version of the story he grew up hearing wasn't true. He said he spent a lot of time trying to understand why his father had simply disappeared, until he realized that, in fact, his father had been forced to leave. That he fled to survive, to keep from going insane. And that now, he wanted to recover what had once been lost. That reconnection was something Derek never imagined he would experience again. Little by little, they talked, understood each other, cried, hugged, and most importantly, forgave each other. Olivia, who had always known the story, welcomed Megan and Blake with an open heart. Chloe, who until then only knew she had two older siblings who lived somewhere in her father's past, now met them personally. And to everyone's surprise, that connection happened in such a natural, sincere way that it felt like they had never been apart. The day of Megan's wedding arrived. Derek was nervous. As much as the conversations had happened, as emotional as the reunions had been, nothing compared to what he was about to experience. It was a mix of pride, love, fear, and gratitude. And in the middle of all this, a strong feeling that, despite everything, he was exactly where he should be. The moment Megan appeared, dressed in her wedding gown, holding the bouquet, walking toward him, was simply indescribable. She was beautiful, her eyes filled with tears, holding back the sobs, and when they met, they hugged as father and daughter who, despite everything, always were. In that hug, it felt like all the time had condensed into that one moment. Every pain, every grudge, every tear, every absence, every sleepless night dissolved right there. As they walked together toward the altar, glances crossed, smiles were exchanged, tears flowed from the eyes of many present. But in the middle of that atmosphere of love and reconciliation, something unexpected happened. Suddenly, among the guests, a presence no one expected appeared. Vanessa. She showed up as if she still thought she had some kind of power, control, or influence. She entered with her head held high, with that old air of superiority, as if she could still cause some kind of discomfort. But what she found was exactly the opposite of what she might have imagined. No one stopped to look, no one was shaken, no one even stood up to ask what she was doing there. Megan, upon noticing her presence, looked directly into her mother's eyes and, with all the confidence in the world, simply said, "You don't belong here. You made your choice, and we made ours." Vanessa was speechless. For the first time, she seemed not to know what to do. She looked at her children, who didn't even return her gaze. She looked at Derek, who remained with a firm posture, holding his daughter's hand, showing that, there, she had no more power, no importance, no relevance. She tried to say something, tried to justify her presence, but Megan was direct. She said that this was her day, that this moment belonged to those who truly contributed to building her life. And that if Vanessa still had any respect for her, she should leave. With no way out, embarrassed, ashamed, she simply turned around and left, perhaps realizing for the first time that the control she once thought she had over that family, simply no longer existed. The ceremony continued, with even more emotion, with even more love, with even more meaning. Because on that day, everyone there understood one clear thing: love, loyalty, respect, and forgiveness will always be stronger than any lie. And when a family is built on truth, neither time, nor pain, nor anyone can destroy it. A few weeks passed after Megan's wedding. Life seemed to have finally found the balance Derek had been seeking. The reunion with his children had filled spaces within him that he believed would never be filled again. Until Derek's phone rang in the middle of the afternoon. When he saw Blake's name on the screen, he answered immediately. His son's voice sounded different. Sad, heavy, weighed down by something he couldn't quite identify. Blake got straight to the point. He said he really needed to talk, but it had to be in person, face to face. Derek became worried, tried to understand what it was about, but Blake only repeated that it couldn't be discussed over the phone. He said he was on his way, and that it was serious. While driving to meet him, Blake's mind kept replaying one scene. Hours earlier, unnoticed by anyone, he had passed by his mother's room and overheard, by chance, a conversation he never imagined he'd hear in his life. Vanessa was on the phone, talking to a friend, and between laughs and malicious comments, she let slip something that made Blake's world simply collapse. She said, in clear words, that she had always had doubts about whether Blake was really Derek's son. That, at the time, she had gotten involved with another man, and that, to this day, that doubt lingered, but she preferred to keep it hidden, tucked away, as if it were something unimportant. Blake froze. It hit him like a punch to the stomach. He was in shock, listening to every word, until, unable to hold back, he abruptly entered the room. Vanessa turned pale. She froze instantly. She tried to hang up the phone quickly, pretending it was a joke, that she was just saying nonsense, laughing, making up stories. But Blake didn't believe her. He stared her in the eyes and, for the first time in his life, spoke with a firmness he didn't know he had. He asked if it was true. He asked if she had lied her entire life. And, unable to give a convincing answer, Vanessa stuttered, avoided his gaze, tried to play it off, tried to laugh as if it were a tasteless joke. But at that moment, there was no more room for jokes or lies. Blake left the house completely distraught. He got in the car and thought of only one thing: finding his father. Because if there was one person in the world he needed to talk to at that moment, it was Derek. When he arrived, Derek immediately realized something was very wrong. His son was pale, his eyes full of tears, holding a whirlwind of emotions that seemed ready to explode. Blake took a deep breath and told him everything, hiding nothing. He recounted exactly what he heard, word for word. And upon hearing it, Derek felt his world collapse again. It was as if a wound he thought had healed was brutally ripped open. A deep, cutting, suffocating pain. But even with his chest tight, he held back his emotions, looked into his son's eyes, and, before any thought could take over, spoke without hesitation: "Yes, you are my son. You always have been and always will be. This has never been in question for me, and never will be." But Blake was too shaken. Even hearing that, even knowing his father's love, he felt he needed answers, needed something concrete, something to end this anguish. And then he said he wanted to take a DNA test. Derek, without thinking, replied that there was no need, that it was unnecessary, that he didn't need to prove anything because nothing would change what they were. But Blake insisted. He said he needed it, that only then would he be able to understand everything he was feeling, that this wasn't about love, it was about clarity, about facing a ghost that was now part of his life. Faced with his son's insistence, Derek took a deep breath, held Blake's hands, and responded that if it would bring peace, then they would do it. And so they did. They went to the lab together. They filled out forms, collected samples, and left carrying the weight of waiting through the longest days of their lives. Each passing day felt like a month. The anxiety, the fear, the insecurity, all mixed together. But at the same time, Derek continued his routine calmly. He was determined. No paper, no test, no confirmation would have the power to change what he felt for the son he had raised, cared for, educated, and loved since the first day of his life. When the results were ready, they opened them together. And there it was. What they both suspected deep down was now written, sealed, indisputable. Derek was not, biologically, Blake's father. The confirmation hit like a bomb. Blake broke down. He cried like never before. It was as if, all at once, the foundation he believed in had crumbled. The pain was suffocating. But before he could drown in that sea of suffering, Derek pulled him into a tight, unconditional hug, and with a choked voice, said, "This changes absolutely nothing. You are my son. You always have been. You always will be. And nothing, absolutely nothing, will change that. Not this paper, not the past, not anyone." At that moment, Blake finally understood the true meaning of family. And from then on, a new chapter of life began. Weeks passed, and the bond between them grew even stronger. Megan, along with her husband, made a decision that surprised and, at the same time, moved everyone. They decided to move to the city where Derek lived because, more than ever, they realized life is too short to live far from those who truly matter. Blake, now more mature, more confident, rented an apartment just a few blocks from his father's house. He wanted to be close, to build a life forward where love, respect, and truth were the only foundations. And since then, weekends became sacred. Family gatherings, barbecues, laughter, endless conversations, games, tight hugs. Chloe grew up surrounded by siblings who love her, a present father, an incredible mother, and a home overflowing with love. As for Vanessa, she was alone. Surrounded only by her own choices, her own mistakes, and the loneliness she had built for herself. Because life has a very precise way of returning everything you give to the world. And in the end, whoever plants lies, reaps emptiness. Whoever plants pain, reaps solitude. And whoever plants love, reaps exactly what Derek, Olivia, Megan, Blake, and Chloe live today, a full life, full of love, complicity, and peace.
Suspicious of your wife or daughter-in-law? Don't go through what we saw in the video. Check the link in the comments and get the ebook with valuable tips and investigator-approved sites to clear your doubts.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.